let's get started with introductions. I'm Emil. I use they, them pronouns. I work with Forge, and I just finished reading your book. Yes. Um, so super excited to talk about the book and the work that you've done for decades now. So I was thinking for just an introduction, you know, name, pronouns, anything you want to share about yourself. And then for a kind of fun question,
Uh-huh.
um, what is a word you would use to describe your gender today that's not a gendered word? So not like man, woman, gender queer, but any kind of other word. I
I
think
got it.
great. And I'll share mine today, I think is it's cloudy and cozy. Like if you could combine those two things, that would be me today.
So my name is Lauren Taylor. I use the pronouns she or they. And today and probably every day, the word I would use to describe my gender that's not a gendered word is feline.
I like that. I appreciate you knew right away too. I don't need an example. I'm here. Great. Um, so do you want to just start us off? Your book and the work that you've done is about empowerment self-defense.
Mhm.
And I know from our previous conversation that's just talking about what that is something that's really exciting to you. So I thought we could start there. What is what is empowerment self-defense? What does that look like? Tell us everything.
Okay.
Maybe not everything, so people want to read the book or come to classes,
Right.
but
So, you know, the popular culture understanding of self-defense is martial arts and kicking and hitting. And empowerment self-defense is, it does involve some kicking and hitting. You want to have those skills for last resort, but it's very different um, than what people think of. It is anything you do to keep yourself safe mentally, emotionally, physically, also spiritually. So we look at the whole range of violations, intrusions, microaggressions from the at the low end of the spectrum, things that are just annoying, all the way up to things that are physically threatening. And we spend a lot of time on the things at the lower end of the spectrum, things like misgendering, or street harassment, uh, because for two reasons. One is if you have a chance to interrupt those, you may be able to prevent them from escalating. The other is that those things, unlike the physical attacks, happen as often as every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I remember when I was young and I used to walk to my job, which was, I think, 2 miles away. Sometimes I would get street harassed 6 or 7 times each way, right? So, even though some people brush those things off as just kind of annoying, they really have a lot to do with our quality of life and our safety. So we spend a lot of time on the things at the lower end of the spectrum, and then the things at the higher end of the spectrum. Yes, we do teach you how to kick and hit, which is important that you have in case you ever need them. But it also is a way of helping you feel more confident trying to interrupt the smaller things. Because if something goes off in the wrong direction, you've got what you need. And the difference between that and what most people think of as self-defense is that we teach simple, effective, practical techniques that you can learn in a 2-hour class. Unlike martial arts, where you have to study for decades and everything's very complicated. And I do not in any way diss martial arts because I did Taekwondo for 20 years. But there's a lot in martial arts, there's a lot of, and in a lot of self-defense, there's a lot of like, if they do this, then put your left hand here and twist under, and it's very complicated and nobody's going to remember it when they're under the stress of an attack. Whereas we teach very simple, straightforward, things that you can learn in a brief amount of time, as I said, and then pull out when you need it.
Yeah.
Some other things about empowerment self-defense is that it is responsive to the kinds of aggressions, whether they're smaller aggressions or more severe aggressions, that women and children and disabled people and LGBTQIA plus people experience. Whereas in traditional self-defense, which usually has a martial arts base, they're teaching you what they know, which is really a man-on-man aggression, cis man on cis man type of aggression. So we look at them more holistic, which is the kind of stuff, they're not teaching you what to do when your partner is abusing you, or your boss is harassing you, or your family member is belittling you. We teach all of those things. Another thing that makes empowerment self-defense what it is that we are extremely trauma informed. Almost everybody who teaches it is a survivor. We actively combat is the wrong word in this context. We actively oppose all victim blaming and honor whatever anybody did to get through.
Right.
And we do everything we can to create as safe a possible of an environment in which people can learn. And we practice what we preach, in that everything in the classroom is optional. So the classroom itself is consent-based. Nobody's pushed into doing anything. Let me just take a quick look at my notes and see if I've left anything important out. We know, well, speaking of a trauma-informed classroom, we know that there's survivors in every room. Like, it's not like, oh my God, there's a survivor in this room, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know that, a lot of survivors are in every room. And we teach with an awareness of how trauma affects people. We focus, unlike what is seen as self-defense, we focus mostly on harassment, abuse, and assault by people we know, because that is the most common. We never tell anybody what they should do. We just look at it as increasing the tools in folks' toolboxes.
Yeah, that's great.
So, I think that's it for what empowerment self-defense is, and I'm just going to add on to the end that there's a lot of efficacy studies that show that it's very effective. Most of the studies that have been conducted are limited to primarily cis women, college age, because that's where most studies happen, is in colleges, because it's a ready population. But in those groups, almost all the studies show that it reduces. So again, given that the population that they're working with, they're also usually just focusing on sexual assault and not on other kinds of attacks. So the research shows that that training in empowerment self-defense reduces sexual assault by 2/3 usually. And this is the part that blows me away. I mean, that's a big number, right? I'm not discounting that, but it also reduces attempted sexual assault, which
Hmm.
means that this is the part that really blows me away. People are stopping things before they know they're stopping something, right? Like they're using their assertiveness, their awareness, et cetera, to interrupt something before they know that there's something to interrupt. So while the research obviously needs to be conducted with lots of different kinds of people, like not college age, you know, different ages, different gender identities, um, different class, um, uh, socioeconomic class, economic class, it still shows that it's very effective. And also, decades of teaching, my students tell me all the time how effective it is.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, and I know you've mentioned classes some, and there's also a book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that Forge is going to have folks from your team come and lead some classes. Um, do you want to just talk briefly about the classes in the book and, ways people can learn empowerment self-defense?
So, yes, uh, the main way to learn is the book. I mean, is classes. The main way to learn is classes. We teach in the Washington, D.C. area where we're based, but we also teach, like for Forge, we teach online. And we also do some traveling. I'm going to a college in Georgia this weekend. And there's other people like us in quite a number of places around the country, not everywhere, unfortunately, but and if you are somewhere else in the country, we could travel to you, we could teach you online. And if you go to the book website, which is getempoweredbook.com, there is a list of practitioners in other places around the country and around the world. I know the list is not comprehensive, and I'm always trying to fill it out with other folks, so that people can find teachers near them. And yeah, the book, you can learn a lot. Basically, you can learn almost everything from the book. What you learn in the book is about the internal transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't learn the physical techniques. You don't get the power of working in a group. But you do learn the internal transformation of healing from trauma, of claiming your assertiveness, of overcoming obstacles to speaking up for yourself, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
I'd love to hear what you would say folks
Yeah.
would learn from the book, since
Yeah,
you read
and
it.
I mean, I really liked it's the subtitle is like a practical guide and it really is it's got questions to ask yourself, space to write or draw, grounding exercises in every chapter. Um, and I think that summary of like it's really about a lot of the internal work feels
Yeah,
very accurate. And
yeah,
um, that stood out to me reading it of just how much thought goes into that of um how we can be empowering while also like helping people think through, our internal thoughts and reactions and behaviors. One example I sent in my list of email questions was like, I noticed myself as I was reading, thinking, oh my gosh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, which the book constantly is like, no.
no shoulds,
Like
no
no
shoulds.
shoulds, no shoulds. Um, and yeah, and so I appreciated that. And like, we notice it encourages you to like notice this reaction is still coming up. Um, and I guess that's kind of, an open-ended prompt to you, like, um, do you want to say more about like some of those internal reactions that people have particularly, I was really interested in this difference between like, I wish I had done something different is
Mhm.
not the same as it's my fault
Yes,
that this happened.
yes,
And I think that's such a critical piece of anti-violence work.
yes. So that framing, I have to give credit to my co-author Nadia Telsey because that really came from her. And she says regret is not the same as blame. So I really wish I hadn't gone to their room. Or you know, I I wish I hadn't had that last drink or whatever. Those you can regret your choices, but none of them mean that you are responsible for someone harassing, abusing, or attacking you. You are never responsible for someone harassing, abusing, or attacking you. There is nothing you can do or not do to cause someone to harm you. Um, so yeah, that's a very important. And I just want to say about the other stuff that you said, like you don't, none of us changes or grows by being hard on ourselves,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
Um, all of the things that you were just talking about, like they're lifetime projects,
right.
right? It's not like, oh, now I'm done with negative self-talk,
Wait, you
right?
this book didn't solve all my problems?
Like I wrote the darn book and like I'm having negative self-talk while I'm writing the chapter on negative self-talk, right? I mean, all we can do is move closer and closer to being kinder to ourselves and being less hard on ourselves and being more where we can be easeful with who we are. But, and the book talks a lot about why we carry these things, right? Which is
Mhm.
because if we didn't talk about that, we'd just be another like assertiveness book,
Right.
right? But what we're talking about is patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism and how those things, particularly through gender socialization, but other ways as well, how those things cause us to suffer in these various ways, including like negative self-talk. Um, and so it's not a personal failing,
Right.
that I have negative self-talk, that you have negative self-talk. Um, uh, it is a consequence of these systems of oppression. And hopefully that helps people relieve themselves of some of the self-blame.
Yeah, I love all of that. I just got like a mini therapy session. So thank you. Um, and it makes me think, I think in another part, partly from like, noticing my reaction, and other parts I was thinking about one of the things that like white supremacy teaches us is this either or thinking.
Yes,
I either did the right thing or the wrong thing. I'm either good or bad, or and I
yes,
think this book really encourages like a much more spaciousness than that,
yes,
both like you just
and
said about
nuance.
ourselves and nuance. And there's a section talking about kind of the practice of assessing our options. You're in a bad situation,
Yes,
um, and like being able to practice ahead of time of noticing choices that we could make, even though
yes,
none of those choices are going to be great all of the time. Like, I think that also challenges this really binary thinking.
yes. And the having the choices to me, well, let me tell a quick story first. I was probably in my mid 30s and I live in a big city and I was riding my bike home from work at a time of day when it was still quite light out, in time of year when it was still light out. And this teenager came after me on his bike and he was threatening me. He was trying to push me off my bike. He was like playing chicken with me, I was like, first I tried my verbal skills and I tried to get him to leave me alone and be assertive, and that wasn't going to work. And then we were in a residential neighborhood, and then I was like, oh, there's a big street a couple blocks away, but I could sprint over there, and then once there's lots of people and traffic, he would probably leave me alone. But I don't think I can get there before him because he's like 14 and I'm like 35. Um, and so I'm thinking through my options, and then I saw someone having a smoke on the front door of like a social services building. They were standing on the stoop. And so I rode my road bike over a curb, um, and up to where this person was. And I was like, can I just hang out with you till this kid is gone? And the kid circled the block like 10 times until he finally left me alone. But when I was done with that experience, and this is the point I'm trying to make, it's just the story, taking the story to get there, is that I realized that in my mind, that was self-defense. What was self-defense was thinking through my choices while under stress, that I still knew I had choices and that I was evaluating them and choosing. And instead of freaking out, which is what, of course, is the natural thing to do when you're under threat.
Right.
Uh, and so whenever a student tells me a story about like, I thought about this and I tried this, and I'm like, that was self-defense. Self-defense isn't hitting the person. Self-defense is thinking through your choices while you're under threat.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I think at some point in the book you use the phrase like acknowledging what you did do.
Yes,
And it is this thinking through this, or you tried this, you tried that. That's good.
right. Yeah, that's really important because I hear this even from self-defense teachers sometimes. This happened, somebody threatened me and I tried this and I tried that and I tried this and eventually I got home. What should I have done? And I'm like, wait a minute, you just told me 4 things you did. Can we review and celebrate those first? Why are we so self-critical that we can't even celebrate our successes? And if you can't celebrate your successes, you can't build on them. And so that's why we celebrate successes so much throughout the book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And I think also helps us put the responsibility on the person causing harm. I think about that a lot. I have like a domestic violence advocacy background and safety planning of like the violence is ultimately the perpetrator's responsibility. And safety planning hopefully will help keep you safer and do a lot of the things you're talking about of helping you identify choices and be prepared for crisis. And the violence is the harm doer's fault. So
Absolutely.
sometimes we do all of those things. We don't control their actions. So, they keep circling the block. They keep harassing you. Yeah.
So safety planning is like a more formalized version of what I was just talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm sitting down, I have an advocate or a safety planner, and I'm thinking through, all my assets and all my threats and what my options are in all these different situations,
Right.
and how I can build up my assets. So it's really the same thing, just on a spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good tool. I'm gonna like shout out this tool for folks who are thinking, coming from that perspective too.
Absolutely.
And also I kind of want to step back from like the concrete skills in the book to hear more about you've been doing this work for decades. So I have a 2-part question and I can repeat parts so you can add in.
Okay.
But like, um, one, I'm interested in the changes you've seen over that time in the world of empowerment, self-defense, of prevention, risk reduction, et cetera. And then part of that history is also, I'm curious about the history of, I know that you've done work to really thoughtfully develop this, the classes and the book with a wide range of communities. So making sure that people of color, trans folks, queer folks, like, are all engaged throughout that process. So that's also kind of the what's the history there of how this has been developed, as well as the context it's been in. Whatever that
Okay.
resonates with you to talk about, whatever you're
Okay.
to talk about.
So I took my first self-defense class in 1985. I started working in gender-based violence way before we called it gender-based violence in 1978, when I was one of the founders of DC's first shelter for abused women and their children. Um, uh, so when I took my first self-defense class, I believe it was 8 sessions, and 7 of them were physical strikes, and one of them was verbal skills. And an outside instructor came in to teach, a separate teacher came in. So obviously, the focus has changed a lot to be more realistic about the kinds of situations women and queers face. Um, uh, the other two things I would say that's changed the most in empowerment self-defense, and then I can go to the other part of your question, is that our understanding of trauma
Mm,
has, which has, I mean, our understanding of trauma has changed, you know, hugely, and also in society. And I have to say, like, those of us who teach empowerment self-defense, we're always saying, like, if you're a survivor, you can go to talk therapy all you want, but unless you do something with movement and accessing your power, the trauma is going to live in your cells. You have to discharge that trauma from your cells. And it was only like 2 decades later that the Bessel van der Kolks and everybody started saying, oh, movement is important to trauma recovery. So we were a little ahead of them, but I'm also saying that, like, trauma, understanding of trauma has changed so much in the world, and empowerment self-defense has it's also changed so much in empowerment self-defense. And the other thing I think that's changed so much, and is also something that's changed so much in the world, is our understanding of gender.
mhm.
Both insofar as, there's a range of genders, there's a variety of genders, it's not a binary, et cetera, not telling anybody who doesn't know, and how violence against LGBTQIA plus people is also gender-based violence, right? It's not a different kind of violence. So those two things, I think, have informed the teaching and the classroom, and evolved the teaching and the classroom a lot. And now, if you want me to answer the other part of the question, I need you to remind me.
Yeah. The other part was more about, like, the it's not just been you doing this work. So if you want to talk some about, like, some of the other people who have been involved, how the work has become really informed by the experiences of LGBTQ folks, folks of color, um, you know, people from different class backgrounds, people with different abilities. We haven't talked much about disability yet, but
Yeah. So that's another thing that's changed a lot, but not as much yet, is talking about disability. I have several usually hidden disabilities. Sometimes they're visible. So I actually was one of the earlier people teaching, like, a disability, a classroom that was thoughtful about a range of abilities.
That's great.
Uh, and teaching teachers how to teach with disabilities as teachers and with disabilities, students who have disabilities. But yeah, I mean, uh, there's so much that goes into the answer of your question. One is very like directly sort of my own lineage, which is people who were the feminists who, essentially started doing empowerment self-defense before it was called empowerment self-defense. Um, I'm 66. Most of them were the foremothers were one generation, were 10 years older than me. And Nadia, my co-author, is one of them. She was really the person who founded the non-physical, and because she had a disability, because she had very severe back pain, and so she couldn't teach the physical. And so she really, I mean, she also believed in the verbal, and the emotional and the mental, but it was also because of her own situation. Um, uh, I have so many things in my head. So almost all of those people who were 10 years older than me and started it, got into it 10 years before I did, were white cis lesbians. But our work is also informed by, the work of the Black Panthers, and other collective self-defense uh, groups that have adopted collective self-defense because they were an oppressed group. And there's a woman whose book we cite in our book, called Wendy Rouse, who wrote the history of women's self-defense in the United States, I think beginning in the mid 1800s. Speaking of self-defense, enslaved people having their own kinds of self-defense, and fleeing is self-defense. Let us not leave that out, right? Like Harriet Tubman and all her pals were self-defense people. Um, uh, uh, Wendy wrote this book from sometime in the 1800s to like the 1950s. I could be wrong. I'd have to look at the book. And now she's writing a book from wherever she left off to the current day. She's a historian and a self-defense person. But she talks a lot about the Black Panthers and how their work led directly to our work. So it's worth checking out her work.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope I've answered some of all this
Yes,
interesting
it was a long-winded way. But I appreciate that answer and just seeing how many movements are connected and that like this work is not siloed and our lives aren't
right. And because I mean because we're humans living among humans, but also because we're all under white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism here in these United States.
I know we've been talking for a while. Are there other things we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about and make sure people know?
Well, I guess since we're talking to a primarily trans and non-binary audience, I would mention that first of all, that the Defend Yourself team of 20 teachers is 13 people who are trans and non-binary. And basically, I'm in the middle of trying to get myself out of leadership. so that it can be led by the people it should be led by. But that we always have to, in any kind of anti-oppression movement, and side note, I really think that empowerment self-defense, is where the rubber meets the road in anti-oppression, anti-gender-based violence, anti-patriarchy. When you're getting to your physical safety, and I just really believe this is like, this is praxis. All of our classes are tailored to the risks and the life situations of the people who are in the class. And so when we're teaching trans and non-binary people, we're looking at how they are most often targeted, and put trans and non-binary people in leadership, in the teaching positions in those classes. So not everybody's doing that yet, but I think we're moving in the direction, meaning other self-defense organizations aren't able to do that yet, but I think we're moving in the direction that we need to go. And certainly people are not necessarily a whatever. That's not somewhere I need to go about what other people are doing, but our trans and non-binary classes are led by trans and non-binary people, and are informed by what we know both from the community and our teachers who tell us about the realities of their lives, and also what we know from the research about what the risks are that they're most likely to face. So we tailor the classes to be most helpful to the folks who are in it.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's such a critical piece. And, again, something that I was thinking about is how not just the risk that we face, but like how people respond to our responses varies so much by gender and race and all sorts of other perceptions, thinking about what the assumption somebody makes about me and the way they respond to me is going to be different than um, a Black trans woman or a Latino trans man or
Right.
any number of other things. And
Absolutely.
so when we're assessing, doing that kind of like sorry. Now I have like a distracting noise in the background. Um yeah, like that. I appreciate that you're kind of talking people through the process of deciding what to do rather than saying this is what you do. It's like,
right.
how can you assess risk? How can you come up with options and think about the risks of those options too? It's like a layer on a layer.
And I think another important piece about what you were just saying about, multiple identities, right? We all hold multiple identities. Is that, what you as a trans person in our class is not necessarily the same as the person next to you needs.
Yeah.
Right. In some ways it'll be true because you're both trans, but in some ways, if you have different identities on other spectrums, it'll be different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think it's a good plug for the classes that we have coming up too, which we'll definitely shout out and share information as we share this in those.
Right.
I'm really excited about them. Um, as we sort of come to a close, I know this puts you on the spot a little bit, but do you have any like brief activity, maybe a grounding exercise or a like, you know, shouting or hitting exercise that you would feel comfortable sharing?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, I don't know if it's the smartest one to pick, but it's the first one that comes to mind on the spot is well, I could think of two. Maybe we'll do them both. and you can pick. So one is simply just a no exercise, and this is exercised in the book, something you can do with a friend or somebody that you trust. And the point of this exercise is, well, what you do in this exercise is you only say no. And while we realize that in real life, you might choose to pad your no, right, with an apology, an explanation, an alternative solution. So for example, if Emil, you said to me like, can can you watch my kids while I run to the store? Right? In real life, I might say, oh, I'm so sorry, but I got a meeting at that time. Or
Right.
I might say, I'm not free, but I know that, you know, uh, Cole down the street is free. Why don't you ask them? Right? That's real life. But the exercise and the reasons you would do that is because, we live in relationship and you may be trying to preserve the relationship, or you may have a reciprocal relationship where we ask favors of each other or whatever. But for this exercise, all you can say is no.
Okay.
And then I'll talk about why later. Okay.
Okay.
So can I have a drink from your water bottle?
No.
Can I use your cell phone?
No.
Can I copy your homework?
No.
Um, can you watch my kids while I run to the store?
No.
Could I have your seat?
No.
Um, sorry, I'm blanking out. Let's just say,
That's okay. Yeah.
so you ask a whole bunch of questions, and how did you feel when I saw something on your face at one point.
Um,
I'm not sure what it was, but how did you feel?
I mean, I think it was comfortable to have a script, right? Like it was easier to just be like, okay, I don't even have to listen to your questions because I know I'm just gonna say no. Um, and then when I was like, okay, but actually pay attention. So I was like listening to the questions and I would have this hesitation of like, oh yes, like um, you know, no, you can't have my water because we're thousands of miles away from each other, or like, well,
So,
actually, I did let everybody cheat off my homework.
oh,
So sure, why not? I don't care. We might cut
um,
it out. Yeah, but I think in that short period of time, just having the script was helpful, and I could see how like going for longer could make it even more stuff come up.
yes, yeah. Um, well, the main reason that we do it, and we do it in live classes where, I ask you questions for 45 seconds, you ask me questions for
Yeah.
45 seconds. Um, uh, is to see what feelings come up when you can only say no, when you're not giving an explanation or an apology or helping the person find alternative solutions. And because there are times when just a no is called for. And
Right.
most of the time, you would want to pad it with one of those other things, but you want to have accessible just a no. And in order to have accessible just a no, you want to know what feelings are going to come up.
Hmm.
Particularly those of us who have been socialized female, right, are going to have a lot of stuff about saying no. Um, uh, so people they come up with a lot of feelings when
Yeah.
they do this. I feel bad about saying no, but it's so you let the feelings come up and you say no anyhow,
Right.
right? So that it's in, like we were talking about before, it's in your toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that like it again reminds me of the safety planning of you're prepared like, oh, I know I'm gonna panic when I say no. So, but that panic doesn't mean I have to change my no to a yes. Like, I know I'm gonna panic when there's a fire, but I know where the exit is. Like,
Right, right.
it, that sort of practice ahead of time can be just so beneficial.
I love how you see the connections with safety planning.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like often where my brain is.
Uh-huh.
So
It's where you come from.
yeah, yeah, that's great. So that's potentially something people have to look forward to in the class is this
Yeah,
practice in a really good
absolutely.
way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.